Okay. Thank you very much indeed, Anna. That's very kind. And thank you to the organisers for inviting me. My apologies for having to speak in English, but you wouldn't like my Norwegian or my Swedish, believe me, terrible. In fact, if my English is half as good as Anna's, I'll be very satisfied at the end of this. So, okay, that beautiful, they were fantastic presentations this morning already, weren't they? And that beautiful last slide, which talked about being strong because you have known weakness, or happy because you've known sadness. These are important concepts, I think. And my theme, my message, I suppose, today is partly about being strong in what you are doing regionally and nationally, and at the same time being strong at the European international level, and how one can help the other, which in turn then helps the other, and so it goes. So I'm just going to try to describe some of the activities which are already happening, and many of you I know are already involved in some of these at least, and where some of this might go in the future, and hopefully develop a sense together of the exciting opportunities which I think, I'm sure, exist for all of us, both nationally and internationally, and the connection. So, my role, as Anna has mentioned, is with EULAR, and EULAR comprises three main bodies, which I'll come to in a moment. But PARE, People with Arthritis and Rheumatic Diseases in Europe, is the section where I'm one of the elected representatives. And as you can see from this wonderful collection of flags, it really is Europe-wide now. There are very few countries now in Europe which are not participating. The three pillars, the three categories of EULAR participation are, of course, the scientific and scientific and clinicians and researchers, the health professionals, formerly known as allied health professionals, and, as I mentioned, PARE, the patient network. Now, EULAR has been in existence since 1947, so a long time, and during that time, I suppose, certainly in the earlier years and decades, because of the high numbers of rheumatologists in particular involved, I suppose it developed a reputation for excellence in rheumatology and science, which it still has now, but was less well known for the collaboration between the three different pillars. And I think one of the things which has changed significantly in the last 10 years, and several people in this room have been party to that, has been much more collaboration and much more genuine partnership. Because from what I understood of some of the earlier presentations, the importance of having an equal dialogue between doctor-patient, between the person with the condition and the people who provide the services, is critical for an individual. It's also critical at the organisational level, I think, if we're going to make really positive change happen at the European stage. And so this is my second time actually as the Vice President of EULAR representing PARE. I was there the first time 10 years ago, and at that time the patient network, I think it's fair to say, was a little bit semi-detached, a little bit on the side of things. And it was my main objective, working with colleagues, to try to make PARE and the patient involvement in EULAR much more fundamental, central to what's gone on. And in fact, the structure has changed now so that this has happened, and the health professionals have gone in a similar direction, which I think is really tremendously encouraging for the future. So, of course, EULAR's name is very much associated with excellence in research and so on. But actually, you know, those important developments in the science only really matter when they translate into better care and support for people living with the conditions, as you know, better than almost anybody. And along with recommendations on treatments and pharmacological developments, it's also so important, isn't it, and I'm sure this was one of the themes earlier, to have a good communication between the health professionals and the people living with the condition, different experts coming together, but equally the social aspects. And I think 10 years ago it would have been quite strange to think of EULAR looking at issues like disability rights or public transport or the way buildings are designed to be accessible or not accessible. But now those issues are very central to EULAR's work as a whole, alongside, of course, the continuing focus on clinical excellence. And again, I think this is something that we can all get involved in to make even stronger. As Anna mentioned, we use in EULAR the phrase RMDs. It's such a long, even for English speakers, it's such a terribly long phrase, rheumatic and musculoskeletal diseases, or some people prefer disorders. The language is not so important. I think the important thing is that this concept is very inclusive. So we really talk in using this phrase about, I think, probably every condition that you would associate as relevant, whether it's back pain or osteoporosis or osteoarthritis, rheumatoid arthritis, etc. So it's very inclusive as a term. I won't spend too long on the structure because it's never the most interesting thing, but what is interesting, I suppose, is the way that the PARE and the health professional representatives now sit on the EULAR executive committee with all the, the very important doctors, and they are brilliant people, with an equality there, with the same right and the same ability to present ideas and project proposals to the executive committee as anybody else. And that's something which has become a lot stronger and better embedded in recent years. For PARE, we have a board, which is unusual because the scientists and the health professionals don't have this, but EULAR, through its PARE members, such as some of your organisations who are represented in this room, elect 8 people to a board, and then there are 2 positions above that, the vice president position, which I currently occupy, and a chair, which go forward to the executive committee. So there's a clear line from the country up to the board, up to the executive committee. And that, I think, is very healthy because it means there is accountability, transparency. What people like me do, I have to be accountable and transparent in terms of all of the voting members, and that means every country in Europe, which I think is democratically very, very sound. There are 2 annual EULAR meetings. Everybody, well, the wider clinical community usually thinks of the enormous annual summer congress, where 16,000 people now regularly come together. But also there's an autumn conference specifically for PARE, and I'll mention that shortly. So the objectives of PARE are really manifold, but some of them are mentioned on this slide. Partly it's about developing a strong network, this sense that by being strong in each of our countries and then working together, everybody benefits. The European level benefits and each of the national countries benefits because we share learning, we share experiences, and we share ideas. And I think providing a platform so that the voice, the authentic, the real voice, your voice of people with rheumatic diseases is given an opportunity to be heard at both national and Brussels, Strasbourg levels. We all know how much legislation now originates from the European Union. And in recent years, through our campaigning, we've been very successful at getting support from the European Parliament. A bit less support so far from the European Commission. And of course, they're very important because they hold most of the money which goes into research funding and other matters which affect us. So we still have a big job to do, and this is where your participation could be vital. So by providing an opportunity to come together and support each other in this way, I hope that we all end up with a better working for our organisations. And some of the projects, which I'll describe in a few moments, are designed to allow this combination of both the pan-European and the national activities to coexist together. World Arthritis Day is mentioned here as one, the 12th of October day, which every year gets bigger and bigger. It's a real snowball that just gets larger. I would also mention the final point here. EULAR has, I think for the first time, been given a grant from the European Union to put together something called EU Musk.net, EUMusk.net, which is for the first time really pulling together the data, the statistics, the information on a country-by-country basis, and putting that together to try to get the best picture we can of the position, really, of rheumatic and musculoskeletal diseases in Europe. It's very hard to lobby for something to be better or different or bigger if you don't know your starting point. So one of our problems, I think, is that politicians often have overlooked this area of health because others around, cancer, diabetes, asthma, have done a good job at getting their data together, and they can say that we want to see an improvement here, and that will be represented by 20% of this or that. It's important to get good evidence for our cause, and we're trying very hard to do that in EULAR. Work, as in employment, of course, is an important topic there. The first point says EULAR selected work as a key issue, but actually it was you and other members across Europe who told EULAR that this is an important issue, and of course it is. We know that there are 120 million people. We think there are about 120 million people with some form of rheumatic musculoskeletal disease. I think the next point should say 40 million, not 40,000, are of working age. It's a huge impact on the individual, on families, on society, and on the economies. And that's an issue for everybody, not just ourselves. So clearly we need good evidence about this impact. We're starting to see some of that, even just in the field of rheumatoid arthritis. We know there's a huge cost every year. It's at the moment believed to be around 45 billion euros, which is massive. So imagine if we could accumulate data of that sort around every condition in our family of conditions. It would be difficult, I think, then for politicians and policymakers to ignore it, because in difficult financial times, when every penny, every euro, every krona has to be counted, well, actually, sometimes that can work in our favour, because if you can make our support cost effective, everybody benefits. So the right to work, I think, is something that we should all have a feeling about, that actually, because you or I or our friend or family or parent or loved one lives with a rheumatic disease, it doesn't mean they should have lower expectations about what they can do, what they can participate in society. And we know that apart from the financial aspects, there's the quality of life. Isn't there that terrible cycle that we need to try to break, where people develop a rheumatic musculoskeletal condition, it's painful, it's harder to be mobile, even to get out of the house and use transport could be difficult. The pain can get worse, it can make you feel depressed, you stay in more, you become isolated, maybe put on weight, which hurts more. And then in that situation, there are comorbidities going on, there's a sense that actually this is not good at all. And what we need to be looking at are things which take the cycle in the opposite direction. Early assessment, a sense of the individual knowing there is something positive that can be done here, taking action, finding support that exists out there, and staying mobile and independent and empowered and really in charge of your own life, which is a right I think we should all expect. But we know how difficult that is to do. It's easier to say, and there needs to be support for people to enable that to happen. So I was in the European Parliament 2 weeks ago for a meeting of a special interest group of MEPs, and the members of the European Parliament were looking at some of this new data, including the EUMusk.net data, which is not yet published fully, but they really now have the message. They've got the message that this area of health is the biggest cause of work productivity loss in Europe. And they're interested in that because that has Euro signs attached to it, and they're very, therefore, interested in this. The Fit for Work project, which is separate from EULAR but is supported by EULAR, and I'll be talking about this project at the end of my presentation today, is something which has only been around for going into 4 years now. But again, is doing a very good job at pulling together some of the key issues about work. So I'll mention work for a little bit now, then I'll talk about some of the other EULAR projects, and we'll finish by looking in more detail at fit for work. But in summary form, we do, I think, now have real evidence about the value of early intervention, early diagnosis, not only for inflammatory types, where clearly the biologics and new developments in pharmacological treatment mean that early diagnosis can make a really important and positive difference to people, but actually in other areas too, whether it's back pain or osteoarthritis. I commissioned a piece of work in the UK a few years ago to look at osteoarthritis, and it took something like, for the average person we interviewed, of the sort of 2,000 people, it took something like 8 visits to a primary care practitioner, a GP, before their osteoarthritis was diagnosed. That didn't mean that the doctors were terrible at their job. A lot of the time it was because the person themselves were not presenting to the doctor. And we've got all these terrible myths, haven't we? All these false assumptions, not you and I, but people in society more generally, who think, well, it's only my bones and joints. I won't bother the doctor, they're very busy. Or, well, in any case, there's nothing that can be done. Even if I did, I've got a bad back, nothing can really be done, can it? Or, it's older people. I don't want to think about this. It's what old people get. Wrong, wrong, wrong. And until we have correct assumptions, more accurate assumptions at the level of the general population in society, I think those myths will continue to damage individuals, because they are part of the reason why people don't always go to seek help early, and therefore don't get the optimal outcome from their treatment. People often present when it's already a bit too late for those best results. So there's a lot of evidence to be gathered, a lot of public-facing work to generate these messages. So, delighted to hear that there's going to be here in Norway regular newspaper coverage of some of these issues that Anna and others have been telling me about. These are the sorts of things that can really make a difference, because they're the things which will change attitudes. And politicians are only interested, forgive me any politicians in the room, but I think it's fair to say, it's where there are financial savings, and it's where there is popularity with the general public. This is what generates a lot of political change. It's our job to make sure that we present a case that is so strong it can't be ignored anymore. And work is clearly critical in this, partly because it affects so many people, and partly because of the financial aspects attached. It's important, I think, that work and health are not in any way seen as, separate things. In the UK, we have one of the Fit for Work European ambassadors, Dame Carol Black. She is a former rheumatologist, which is good for us, because her current position now is in the Ministry with Work. So she advises the Department of Work and Pensions on issues to do with work and health. So it's lucky for us that she has a musculoskeletal rheumatic disease background. And I've heard Carol speak many times, she always tells the audience, I thought I was doing a really good job as a rheumatologist when I, identified changed the pattern of the disease, that people left my clinics less sick, better results from their tests. And she said, and actually, that wasn't really the measure. The measure really was that person returning to something that they had previously and they wanted to return to, which could be a job. It could be family life, of course, it could be other things. But she realizes now she was too focused on disease management and actually should have been more focused on person management, because you treat people, not diseases, in my opinion. And therefore, if we can develop health technology assessments which take account of issues like this, then I think we really will start to see the coming together of the clinical and the social, because we as individuals don't live with these things in separate boxes, do we? We just live one life, and within that life, all of these things are relevant. So seeing a return to work, or at least a return to the possibility of work, I think should be a legitimate clinical outcome of treatment. So lots of projects with EULAR, not only ones which relate to work. The work ones I've put into the centre of this presentation, if you can see it, yeah. There are many other things going on. I've mentioned World Arthritis Day, so those circles around the side I will describe briefly for you now. But I think one of the best developments we've seen in EULAR recently, as I mentioned at the beginning, is the fact that nearly all of these activities now, whether they're originally scientific in nature or more social and political in nature, are all being carried out by teams, health professionals, clinicians, and patients living with the condition, working side by side. And I think that's very important. I suspect 20 years ago, from the patient network point of view, many of us might have felt a little bit intimidated to become working alongside these world-famous scientists, as sitting on their standing committees or their task forces as the patient representative. But we've developed ways of supporting people to do that effectively now. And actually, we've almost come the other way, so that some of the doctors now sometimes a little bit anxious about joining in with these patient activities because they realise it's not their primary expertise. But equally, they recognise that we're all part of the same team. So very encouraging indeed. The annual Summer Congress, I know many of you attend regularly. Please continue to do so. I mean, it was in London this year, and over 16,000 participants. It's crazy, really. I think it was the biggest medical event in the UK ever. And that's why only so few cities in Europe now can actually host the Congress, because the size of the buildings you need to run an event of this kind, it's very challenging. And it's very challenging for someone living with a rheumatic condition as well to navigate these large areas, and we're very conscious of that and always try to do everything we can to keep the room we use close to the entrance and to minimise the amount of walking. But for all of the logistical challenges, it's a really important event. And the PARE work, I think the PARE sessions are very important in getting this sense of everything being connected. So if you look at the topics last year or coming up for next year in Berlin, yes, there will be sessions given to comorbidities, there will be sessions given to rare diseases, but there'll be sessions that aren't about what's going on in the body as well. There'll be sessions about employment, about work, for example, and there'll be other social issues covered too. And to have health professionals and clinicians participating in those topics too is a real advance. People are starting to see the bigger picture. The program itself is put together from ideas. So I have the overall responsibility, but I work with a small task force. But actually we consult all of our members on their ideas. It's not the quality of the person recommending a topic which decides, it's the quality of the idea. So anybody can suggest topics for inclusion at the Congress, and every idea will be considered by a panel. So again, please keep putting in your ideas, what you would like to see discussed in these sessions. There is a session, as I said, on work next year. It's called How to Find a Job and How to Keep It, and that's about developing the employer-employee dialogue so that people living with rheumatic conditions do get the support that they are entitled to, and which is better for everybody. So I hope many of you will be there for that. The autumn conference takes place this year in 4 weeks' time in Athens, and again, something that's been happening annually now for I think about 10 years, if not more, and another opportunity to come together. This is for PARE members only, but having said that, we have the president of EULAR coming to give an address as well, Maxime Dougados, and again it's an opportunity not only to listen to speakers, but to have lots of interaction, lots of breakout groups, discussions, so that we can take things away from that, which I hope then make a real practical difference in the different countries. So when the event finishes after 3 or 4 days, that isn't the end of things, that's really the beginning of things. It's after that, when ideas are taken back to national societies like yours, that we can really start to say, right, what did we learn? What is it that could work in this country here? Okay, we might need to adapt it and do it differently, but ULAR never tries to give any rules and say you must do it this way and not that. It's all just resources, ideas, thoughts for you to consider and decide what works for you and what wouldn't work for you. So we have about this year about 130 representatives. We try to ensure two people per country attend. And again, if you're attending, please give us your feedback, and most importantly, give feedback to your colleagues as well, so that everybody learns and not just those people who are lucky enough to attend. Just keep an eye on the time. Speed up a little bit. Edgar Stine, well, of course, I'm conscious that I'm in Norway and Oslo, so I'm not going to tell you too much about Edgar Stine, but the prize named after Edgar Stine is, of course, in recognition of people who express and articulate what it's like to live with a rheumatic musculoskeletal condition. Very inspiring, very, very powerful, and work, again, has been a major theme in this in recent times. And again, the scientific community in ULAR is very aware of this, very supportive, and it's recently become an annual now prize, not a biannual, so it's every year, not every 2 years. So a fantastic opportunity, and the best ones, usually around 10, get published and distributed at the ULAR Congress. Nothing is more powerful than hearing it directly from people who live with the condition, as you know. World Arthritis Day is really, as I said earlier, getting stronger all the time. It is about awareness raising. We have a theme every time, usually for 2 years, and again, work has been used there. But it's up to you. If you want in Iceland or Estonia or Finland to do something different, fine. If you want to use the day, it's there. You can say to your journalists and your politicians, we are doing something in Norway, but actually in 48 different countries, similar groups are doing similar things, and that becomes an interesting story for people at the national, local level then too. The message is, if it helps and it works for you, you do it, please. But we're not instructing anybody to do anything. These are just opportunities. World Arthritis Day, as I mentioned, has featured work, and some of the materials you can see around the room have been produced out of these projects, including the Charter for Work, which is to my right in the corner there. So do have a look. It's in English, I'm afraid, but do have a look if you have the time. And the Working Wonders exhibition, where you see some lovely photos and really powerful quotations from people, again, came out of an idea of using visual images to show that people with RMDs actually just want to do what other people do, to work, to have fun, to make mistakes, to just get on with life, really. And sometimes a picture paints 1,000 words or something like that, I think. So video use is always good, and I'll be showing a short film, as Anna mentioned, in a couple of moments. The Charter for Work itself calls for better support for people, of course, with rheumatic diseases who are working or want to work or want to get back to work. We know that we can't do that without the support of employers, policymakers, trade unions, and therefore these things need to be collaborative. This is all part of the bigger picture. It's okay for us to say in isolation, we want this and we want that, but if we don't take other people with us, we're never going to get it. The Charter for Work was launched in the European Parliament. There's the Charter and there's the launch, so I've given you some evidence, I think. It was a wonderful event, and you can see there were lots of people signing from different countries, and again, it's something which unites us all, but you can use differently. You can translate it and use it in your country how you wish to. The Charter for Work I mentioned the different people we need to work with. Healthcare providers also, of course, critically important, but equally patient organisations. We have a duty, I think, to support our own members in this respect, but equally to persuade others, including the media, including healthcare professionals, of the importance of talking about work when you're treating or managing your patient. It's critical. the Working Wonders exhibition came originally from a photo competition called Picture This. If you look at the World Arthritis Day website, you'll see we still use and encourage visual images as part of the story. It can be so powerful. There's the travelling exhibition, which you can see around coming up on the slide. But I'll let you look at the actual slide, the real thing, over lunch. So I won't spend long going through these when they're already in the room with us. So, before I break for a movie, a very quick summary of some of the current political activities that EULAR is involved in and need your support, whatever your role. I mentioned the interest group of MEPs. They meet 3 times a year. Topics for the agendas for next year is open. If you've got some suggestions, give them to me, give them to PARE, give them to another member of the people involved with EULAR's work here. We've seen the Belgian government, when they were president of the European Union for 6 months in 2010, provide the platform for the first ever official conference, EU conference on musculoskeletal conditions, chronic conditions, but nevertheless we were featured significantly and uniquely within it. That led to a declaration which gave us a platform to say this is what we think people with rheumatic diseases want. And then ministers from every country in the EU came together and considered that and more or less approved the approach to chronic diseases which came out of that work. So we've seen a line there go from the national PARE members right the way to ministers of health from across Europe. I mentioned work charter. We'll talk about Fit for Work in a moment. And earlier this year, the Hungarian presidency, each presidency is 6 months. The Hungarian government hosted a conference specifically on rheumatic and musculoskeletal diseases in the context of work. So we're seeing one presidency after another now looking at this area. And even 2 or 3 years ago, that would never have happened. So we've got something important here. And of course, I believe Denmark takes over the presidency very soon. So we need to have some dialogue going on there too, of course. Right, I'll give you a break from my voice now, and we'll have a quick look at this short video clip, and then just a few more minutes after that. Are we ready to show this? So again, this is a national case study from the UK, but it just gives an idea, I think, about the issues we're talking about in a real world context.
All of us will have some pain one day in our life, probably several days in our life. And then I think the thing is to have the work adaptable to that pain, or you can still do most of the work. People with rheumatic diseases within EULAR say, we want to work, we can do a good job for our companies, but we need some adaptations, and I think they're perfectly right. With sometimes minor adaptations they can, of course, do, and they have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge.
Our last sort of position with any employee is failure of health. So we will do everything we can with an employee to keep them active within the workplace and to help and support them before we get to that point of retiring someone on ill health.
If a person is away from his job 3 months or more, I mean, the probability that he or she will come back is rapidly decreasing. Absolutely. So keeping the person in job even for 2 hours a week is probably beneficial for the national economy and for the single company.
We do take a broad, pragmatic view to how we look after our people, and very often the cost of recruiting, training, bringing somebody through the workplace to retain them in work and manage that effectively is still far more cost effective than considering, you know, a shortcut and taking them out of the workplace. Similarly, within our production and the factory environments, which are more physical, it's again making certain that we look at the ergonomics of the production line and the tools and equipment that people need.
Pauline's been with the business a couple of years now.
18.
Yeah. So having that wealth of knowledge is obviously very good for the business.
A couple of years ago, I had a bad back and was unable to work for a little while. And so we had to make some adaptations to my working to enable me to come back to work and work comfortably.
We can intervene early, which always helps to get that intervention, and then we make adjustments within the workplace. And I'd say to date we find that most workplaces can be adjusted to support the individual. We actually work quite closely with line managers, and even if someone's on extended sickness because of an illness or an incapacity, that we still connect with them on a very regular basis. The aim is to get them back into the workplace as far as we possibly can.
We did explore quite a lot of brochures and things that we could buy, but they were very expensive. We didn't want to go down that route, and so we decided to make adapt the desk.
We found one that we could actually jack up to a point where it's a standing position. So Pauline kept swapping desks.
I did need to get up, walk around quite a bit, so try and manage my work so that I would take proper breaks.
We took a step back and go, right, and we forced you to go into a place where, right, this task is about 2 hours, do that task, then take a break.
Next to my desk, there's a high sort of table. And so if I was doing any written work, I would just stand up and do that written work at that table.
It's often the small things that make the biggest difference, certainly for the employee. And it might be that an employee needs a headset, so they're not sort of trying to hold the phone like a cradle in their neck and get neck problems. It might be that it's a footrest because somebody's a little bit short and they need to sit comfortably at their workstation. So these things are very simple.
I did have a little twinge a few weeks ago, so it was a case of we had a quick makeshift on that. I've got a nice a cardboard box which I put on my desk just for a quick makeshift because I just needed to stand up for half an hour or so. We
also changed working hours, so we started with Pauline coming in earlier to avoid the traffic so that you had less time physically travelling. We also had reduced working hours.
If I look at one of our early adopting pilots of the UK business, we adopted agile working. Over the following 12-month period, we actually saw a lower attrition rate of people leaving the business. We certainly saw a lower sickness or absence rate over that period than we had previously. And the business performance, which ultimately is the reason we're in business, is to make sure we hit our goals, was probably one of the best we'd had in many years. So now, outside of that was a very, very complex and very challenging commercial and economic climate, but for the business to perform at that level, personally I would say was down to actually giving people a better work-life balance and allowing them to really focus on what they have to deliver.
Human resources have looked at how do we actually look at work patterns. I think the biggest obstacle was for managers to realise that they can empower their people to work away from the business, get on with their jobs and deliver what the business needs. Our return on investment has been such that we're in our 13th quarter now of growth in the company. And in this economic crisis, that really is good for the company.
The great balance we have in the message nowadays is we will help you, but you also have to help yourself.
But it's about the communication. Pauline's off sick. This is the reason why we're going to have a return to work plan. We need some help and support from everybody so that when Pauline does start doing a phased return to work, that people knew what was going on. You've got tools and technology, but you can pay for those and you can easily outsource everything. But having the people and their knowledge and their understanding to be able to interpret what we do, that's where your added value works. And that's where businesses make a difference. It's all about people.
policymakers, employers, healthcare providers, and other stakeholders do have in creating a framework for working environment that allows people with musculoskeletal diseases to stay in work, to get into work.
So I hope you agree it's not a heavy message. It's quite easy to look at, and yet a lot of the key messages that we've talked about were in there, about a lot of times the adaptations necessary being quite simple, not always very expensive. Doing it early is important, and these are things which our politicians and others need to hear. So this sort of medium, I think, can be very effective. So if you have the resources, maybe it's something to consider. Right, final part, quite short. I won't repeat things I've said earlier, but Fit for Work is an important project. EULA does support it, and I know when Svein kindly invited me to speak today, he suggested this might be a good topic. So I'll finish on this. The intention really is obvious. It's to make as much support happen for people with rheumatic and musculoskeletal diseases as possible, to allow them to find a job or to keep a job. It's only 3 or 4 years old, so initially it was about telling the world it existed, then attracting the interest of people, and then making positive change happen by working collaboratively. Again, a bit like PARE's work, some of it is about European-wide, some of it is about working at the national level, and part of the campaign for Fit for Work is to put friendly pressure on national governments to deliver national plans. What are you going to do about it in Denmark, considering this is what other countries are doing at it, for example? Some of it needs some funding, but the important message is that there are savings at the end if you invest early in supporting people. And again, work as an outcome of clinical treatment is also a central message for Fit for Work. And you'll see that there are many international supporters of the project, but the most important thing really perhaps is the bottom level, which is you and me. Everybody lives in one country or another, and that's where most of the change can really happen. So some examples in the UK now, we are starting to see work retention, staying in work, as an important measure, outcome of clinical treatment. I know that health technology assessments in some parts of the world, including I believe Sweden now, are taking account of social issues more, especially work. Israel has done some great work in this respect by becoming a partner to Fit for Work, so the actual government has become a partner, which is a tremendous message. And in Catalonia in Spain, I think I'm allowed to say it's in Spain, but apologies if that's not good. There's some primary care work going on with general practitioners to see what can be done in this respect. So we'll get some good modelling done to show that this can be effective in practice. So it's real and we've got evidence. I mentioned the support we've had from recent presidencies. Currently Poland are also giving us their support in this respect. And the whole treat to target concept, which many of you or maybe all of you are aware of, I think is so important here. This is all about putting the person with the condition, the patient, at the heart of everything, and seeing what can be done to best support the individual in a way which also brings benefits to others, including employers and governments. And there's a lot of collaboration going on. EFFORT, which is of course the orthopaedics network, the orthopaedic equivalent of EULA, although they don't have patient groups, and business representatives and trade unions and many others are having a really informed dialogue now about how this work can be taken forward so that it becomes bigger and bigger each year. The most recent event was just a week or two ago in the European Parliament, where the 4th annual conference took place, and EULA, through myself, was represented once more. There were over 100 participants in an all-day conference, including many members of the European Parliament themselves, and many people from patient groups and from business, a real coming together of the people who really matter in all of this. most importantly of all, people who live with the condition themselves. And around the world, again, we're seeing support not only from the European Union, but also in this period from the Polish presidency. And whilst we've had the Hungarian government provide an event which celebrated, if you like, what can be done in terms of work and people with musculoskeletal conditions, we're also seeing new governments and new presidencies taking the same message forward. So all of this is just getting bigger and bigger all of the time. So the final Fit for Work message, I suppose, really is that if we can attract the attention of busy people like former Poland President Lech Wałęsa, who was with us in Brussels a couple of weeks ago for the whole day, if we can attract the attention from high-level ambassadors like that, then I think it's just one more bit of evidence about the opportunities that exist. So it's a big picture. It's a big thing. It's a big opportunity. But, you know, you do big things every day, whether you're living with your condition and having your family life or going to work, whether you're a health professional. We all do big things. It's how we do them. And I think by looking at the opportunities that exist for making big change happen across all of Europe, we're simultaneously looking at big changes that can happen in each of our countries. They support each other. So for me, it's not a case of if it's going to happen, it's just when and how, and your participation will make it happen better and more quickly. So I thank you for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.